All right, so have you ever stopped to think about what a massive street protest and, say, a local bake sale have in common? I mean, they seem like they're from completely different planets, right? But they're both part of this, well, this hidden power that's all around us, shaping our lives every single day. Today, we're going to dive into what that is. We're talking about civil society.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, what is the connection? A protest demanding huge political change? A bake sale raising money for a good cause? A union fighting for better pay? It really does feel like we're comparing apples and, I don't know, spaceships. But trust me, there's a common thread that ties all of these together, and we're going to find it. Okay, so the answer? It all comes down to what a lot of political scientists call the space in between. Sounds a little mysterious, right? But it's really just the part of our lives that isn't the government, it isn't big business, and it isn't just our immediate family. Let's unpack what that really means. So here it is, the core idea. Civil society is basically everything that happens in that in-between space. Think of it this way. You've got the state or the government over here. You've got the market, so businesses, over there. And you've got your own family life right here. Civil society is the world of voluntary groups where we as citizens team up to get stuff done. So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, it's a huge, massive range of things. We're talking about everything from trade unions fighting for workers' rights to big international NGOs like Doctors Without Borders. It's massive social movements that you see on the news like Black Lives Matter, but it's also something as local as your church group or the neighborhood watch. Heck, even independent media groups fit under this umbrella. It's really the fabric of our social lives. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, a strong civil society sounds like a really good thing, right? I mean, it seems like a key ingredient for a healthy democracy. And you know what? In a lot of ways, it absolutely is. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? This is where things get really interesting and kind of complicated, because this simple idea is actually a battleground for some really powerful and totally competing ideas. And that brings us to our first major clash of ideas. Is civil society a genuine force for freedom? Or could it actually be a tool for domination? Let's get into it. Okay, so the classic, kind of traditional liberal view sees civil society as this super important buffer zone. Think of it like a shield or a shock absorber that stands between us as regular people and the immense power of the state. These groups, they give us a collective voice, you know? They help make sure the government doesn't get too powerful or overstep its bounds. But of course, there's a totally different, much more critical take. From a Marxist perspective, civil society isn't neutral at all. Nope, it's just another part of the capitalist machine designed to serve the interests of the ruling class. Then, you've got the Gramscian view, which adds this fascinating twist. It says, yeah, it's about domination, but not just through force. It's through culture, through ideas. It's a subtle kind of power that's maintained because we basically consent to it. But, and this part is absolutely crucial, it also means that civil society can be the exact place where we start to push back and fight against those dominant ideas. So this leads us to another big debate, another fork in the road. Is the whole point of civil society to build real, genuine community? Or has it slowly turned into something else, something more like a business, a commodity you can buy and sell? Well, on one side, you've got what's called the communitarian view. And for them, it's all about one thing, social glue. This idea says that the real purpose of all these community groups is to build trust, to create shared values, to stick us together. It's where we learn how to cooperate and work together for the common good. It's a lot less about me, and a whole lot more about us. Okay, now let's switch gears and look at a much more modern trend. This is the neoliberal view. Here's how it often plays out. First, the state or the government starts to pull back on providing social services. Then NGOs, often funded by that same government, step in to fill the void. Suddenly, civil society becomes a service provider. Now, what's the potential downside here? Well, critics argue this can turn passionate, fiery advocacy groups into something more like government contractors. They get so focused on delivering a service that they stop pushing for real, deep political change. But hang on a second. Here's a really crucial point we have to make. Pretty much all of these models we've talked about so far, they come from a largely Western point of view. So what happens when we zoom out and look at the rest of the globe? Do these neat little boxes and ideas even hold up? Well, The simple answer is not really. A one-size-fits-all model just falls apart, especially when you start looking at the incredibly unique histories of post-colonial nations and what we call the Global South.
So what's the key difference? Well, the Western model tends to focus on formal, often secular NGOs. Organizations with a board of directors and a mission statement. But in many parts of the Global South, civil society looks completely different. It's often built on much more informal networks, and these networks are frequently centered around things like religion, ethnicity, or indigenous identity. And maybe most importantly, it's deeply, deeply tied to historical struggles, especially against colonialism.
Okay, so after going through all of that, you've got to be wondering, which view is the correct one? Is it the liberal view, the Marxist, the communitarian? Well, the answer might surprise you. It's kind of all of them. The trick is to stop thinking of them as competing truths and start seeing them as different lenses, different pairs of glasses we can put on to see the whole complex picture. Let's put this into practice, right now. You see a group like Human Rights Watch? That's a perfect example of the liberal buffer against the state. What about a super fancy corporate charity gala? Well, you could slip on your Marxist glasses and see that as a clear display of class power. An independent media outlet trying to challenge the mainstream narrative? That's a Gramscian site of cultural struggle. Your local neighborhood association working to build social bonds? That's pure communitarianism. An NGO delivering food aid after government cuts? That fits the neoliberal model to a T. An indigenous rights movement fighting for land and recognition? That is a perfect example of that context-specific struggle we see in the Global South. See? They are all civil society. So the real takeaway here is this. Civil society isn't just one simple thing. It's this incredibly dynamic, messy, and constantly contested space where power is always at play. So the next time you see any kind of community group in action, doesn't matter if it's a huge protest or small fundraiser, you now have the tools to look a little deeper. And you can ask yourself the really important questions. What role is this group really playing? And maybe more importantly, who does it truly serve?